Today I want to look at the two touring Softails from Indian and Harley. We have the Harley Heritage and the Super Chief Limited. Now I'll go ahead and say right off the rip, this is a 23, this is a 2018. In 2018, they made some significant changes to the Softail lineup, and not a lot has changed since, so it's going to be a fairly even comparison either way. And while both bikes share some similarities, if you just look at them on the surface, there is a lot of differences between these two bikes. That's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to look at the pros and cons, going to look at the differences, and so that way, if you're looking at a Softail and you want something like a light touring machine, hopefully I'll be able to give you all the information that you need. If you like what I do here, consider subscribing and hit your notifications. And this is all big thanks to American Biker for letting me come out and show off these two motorcycles to y'all. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's talk about some of the similarities between the two bikes. You got the 116 Thunderstroke in the Indian, 120 foot-pounds of torque. We got the 114 in the Harley. I want to say it's roughly around 110 foot-pounds of torque. Both bikes are super torquey across the rev range, where I do find that the Harley, does really well in the lower revs. The Indian tends to do well throughout the rev range, but they're both torquey machines. They both can pull a freaking stump out of the ground if you want them to. Now, you're not going to be beating any leader bikes in a straight line, but you can get up to speed really quickly on both motorcycles. So they're very similar in that way. Also, you have big floorboards on both motorcycles, forward controls. So as you can see, they're both set up for light touring, and they're the lightest touring motorcycles in their respective lines. They both have windshields, different profiles, but again, they're quick release windshields on both motorcycles. And that's pretty much where the similarities stop. All right, so they both have spoked wheels up in the front. You have the Dunlop tires on the Harley. You have the Pirelli Night Dragons on the Indian. They both have single disc. One thing that they both do really well, although in a different way, is kind of pay homage to like the Heritage of old or the Chief of old, but aesthetically they are wildly different. You have the big front fender on the Heritage here. Looks really classic. It's a Heritage Classic, so go figure. And then you have the bobbed fenders on the front of the Indian. You also have bobbed fenders on the back of the Indian, we'll get there in a minute, and then a full fender on the Harley Davidson. Another big difference is the lighting. And typically I prefer lighting on the Heritage because of these passing lamps. You of course have your Daymaker here in the middle, and they still give you halogen bulbs. Even to this day, it's still halogens. Up front on the Indian, we have the FTR light, and then the LEDs down below that. You got some black trim on the windshield on the Indian, and then pretty much else is like this mixture of chrome and kind of a satin finish as far as on the top of the heads, and then of course your pipes and all of that kind of stuff. So they kind of do a mixture of the black and chrome, whereas Harley, they have this chrome strip on the windshield. They look about the same height, and then you have pretty much blacked out everything as far as on the side of the engine. You have the Showa front forks up front. Now these are not the standard handlebars that come on a Heritage, so it's not really apples to apples there. I will talk about it a little bit because I've ridden a stock Heritage. Between the two bikes they're similar, but we'll talk about that on the road. On the Indian, you have the 4-inch ride command. So this is going to give you navigation. It'll give you weather updates, Bluetooth, of course. You have multiple different screens that you can use on this. So this is a really powerful system. Plus, you actually get ride modes out of this bike. On the Harley, it is a traditional cluster. And so if we look at this one, you have your analog speedometer. Everything else, it shows up in a little digital display right there. You got your neutral light right under that on the console. And then you have a fake cap over here, and then your actual gas cap on the right-hand side. You have this little strip right here, this little leather strip with these studs. You'll notice that these studs are kind of throughout on the seats and all that. That's just something they do on the Heritage. So when it comes to your clusters and the abilities you have, Indian wins this hands down. And again, I think it might be something that Harley does just because they don't want it to be too different than what people know. Whereas Indian said, all right, let's pay homage to the bikes of old, but still add in some new technology. So I really do appreciate that Plus this thing is just so much more useful than what you get on the Harley. Indian has a 4-gallon tank, a little bit slimmer in profile. The Harley has a 5-gallon, so you're gonna get a little bit more bang for your buck when it comes to the distance you can go there. And then they're both set up for a passenger. What I find is that the Indian seat looks more premium to me, but the Harley seat is more comfortable. So that's just something I noticed there. They both have passenger pegs, pretty standard, 6-speed transmission. And then I want to talk about the bags. The bags on the Indian look absolutely perfect. What I like that they did is they slimmed down the top and then they kind of widened it as they go down towards the pipes on both sides. So they really hug the lines of the bike, and to me it's just a more appealing look. On the Harley, they stick out a little bit more, but not only are they easier to access, but they're also lockable and what looks like more storage. I could be wrong there, but it does not look like you have very much storage here in the Indian at all. Of course, they have the what looks like old school buckles on the outside, and they actually have the little clips underneath. So when it comes to the aesthetics of the bags, I like the Indian better. When it comes to functionality, I think Harley does a better job. Both bikes look really different as far as the fender too. You have this old style Zeppelin light. It's not LED. You have the halogen turn signals. And just overall a full fender compared to the chopped fender on the Indian. So your brake light and turn signals operate in these two right here, and then a chopped fender right there, so you see more of the rear tire. This purely comes down to aesthetics. You got the pipes on one side on both motorcycles, so really it just depends on which one you like that looks better. Now this one obviously has a little bit of movement. I made a short on this talking about that because it's longer, right? Whereas the one on the Indian is more solid, but it's also has less aluminum or metal that's kind of hanging down unsupported in a way. I don't think that really bothers me on either bike, but just something that I wanted to point out. Here you have your license plate holder. I'm not a fan of this at all. You know, Custom Dynamics makes one that will actually curve to the fender itself. That looks a lot better. But honestly, I think I like the one better on the Indian. It has the side-mounted license plate, and it just looks aesthetically more pleasing. So we talked about all the basic things and differences between the bikes. Let me get on them, and we're going to take them around a little bit and see which one rides better. And after that, I'll tell you which one I actually like better. Let's go ahead and get our helmet on. Now, I always talk about seating position because for me personally, it's a big deal. I want to be comfortable on my bike. These, of course, have aftermarket bars, so it's not totally fair. But what I do notice about this bike is it is one of the most comfortable positions I think I've ever been in on a motorcycle, hands down. My feet are perfectly out in front of me. I got big old floorboards right there. My butt is firmly planted and my arms are, you know, level with my shoulders. It is absolutely incredibly comfortable. I'm trying to think when I rode that Heritage Classic. It was a 107, and that bike I called the most comfortable Harley I think I'd ever ridden. Another thing you notice with this bike, they claim from 2017 to 2018 that this one's 35 pounds lighter. It's got the second gen M8, and it's just super smooth all the way around. You know, if you come from like a twin cam 103 and you ride something like this, it may be slightly jarring to you of how smooth it is. You may think, oh, this is a nice metric bike, if you didn't know any better, of course. But it is really that smooth. Very little vibration. Another thing I like about these bikes a lot is the fact of how light they feel compared to, you know, your road glide, your street glide. But it still shares the capability, of course, of being able to do some touring. Still got cruise control. We got a windshield, of course, that's going to keep some of the fatigue and wind off of our chest. And what you'll notice with both motorcycles is, you know, you're going to get a little bit of a wind tunnel in through here, but it's not a huge deal. Now, unless you're going, you know, super long distances, then then you may for sure notice something like that. It's just a really kind of easy bike, easy going, but a bunch of torque. I think one thing I would like to see on both motorcycles is dual disc up front. The braking power isn't bad. I just think it would help out a little bit for sure. If for whatever reason the big touring motorcycles are a little bit too much for you, this is definitely a good option. I think what impresses me about this motorcycle the most is just how smooth it is. Just a really awesome and comfortable motorcycle. Now, of course, you're going to miss some things from your big touring bikes, your fairing, your radio, stuff like that. But if you're not concerned with that, this is amongst one of the best light touring motorcycles that I've ever ridden, and definitely one of the most comfortable. I really like this bar setup too, man. This thing is nearly perfect. Seat has pretty good lumbar support. And from what I remember about the Super Chief Limited, that one looks really good, but it's kind of hard as a rock. I'm about to find out here in 2 seconds though, if my memory serves me correct or not. By the way, trying to find neutral on this one is like most Harleys. It's a little game you get to play with yourself. What a awesome motorcycle, dude. This, to me, is pretty much the perfect second bike. And I think it's really, you know, the weight reduction, and it still fits a lot of my needs. And yet, if I want to just cruise around town, I can do that. You know what I mean? It's kind of a jack of all trades motorcycle. We got another jack of all trades over here in the Super Chief Limited. Oh yeah, seat height is definitely lower. I don't know how long it's been since I've ridden one of these. It hasn't been too long. We obviously have our turn signals over here on the one side instead of one on each bar. Wow, this is interesting. The Super Chief Limited is my favorite Chief. Let me go ahead and say that. But when I just instantly, the first thing I notice, these floorboards are up a little bit too high, or something is positioned off. Not from the factory or anything, but on the Harley, my legs are more pushed down. They're more comfortable. On this one, I feel like my knees sit up a little bit taller. I never noticed that before. That's pretty wild. I also feel like the Harley may do better as far as the rear shocks a little bit. Yeah, this one's super torquey as well. One thing I like, you pull on the clutch on the Indian, your gear indicator does not go away. That's a nice feature. Yeah, I think we'd be having a different conversation as far as the shock absorption if this one had the KYBs on it, like the Sport Chief does. And it's not like unmanageable, it's just riding these bikes back to back. You find out a lot about these motorcycles, man. That's why I always suggest to people, if you can, you know, if you're looking at two bikes, try to ride them back to back, because it tells you so much. Yeah, the position of these floorboards, I like where they're at. They just come up a little bit too far, or the seat needs to come up just a little bit or something, because like I said, I just need my legs to drop down just a little bit. All right, we're gonna put it in sport mode here in a second. I feel like the clutch on the Harley engages a little bit quicker too. Yeah, you definitely feel that throttle wake up when you throw it in sport mode. Yeah, these bars would have to come up for sure. It's like I said, it's kind of unfair because the Harley has aftermarket bars already, but staying in this position for too long, that would kind of suck, at least for me. Now, how they come back in the riser is not so much a problem, just the height of them. And even at 55, you still get that little bit of turbulence here, which is what I was talking about on the interstate. It's still going to do a better job than no fairing or no windshield at all. So I think all in all, man, I know which one I like the best and why. Let's go ahead and get back to the shop. Also like the kickstand better on this one. It's more responsive, better spring tension. So here's where I'm at with it, man. I believe this right here is superior. I also like the aesthetics of the bag and the seats, for that matter, on this one. The sport modes give you more variety, of course. Now, the difference between the throttle response on each, the Harley kind of feels like this one in standard mode with a little better response, if that makes sense. All right, this one feels a little bit more sluggish if I compare standard to, you know, just what that has, obviously. The 116 Thunderstroke, I've heard these things with pipes on them. They sound really good. Much different than the 108 Power Plus. I like the blacked out trim they put here on the windshield. I like that it's removable. They did a lot of good things here, and I think I prefer the rear end of this one. It just looks cleaner. Side mounted license plate, LEDs all the way around. I definitely appreciate that one. But this one is not as comfortable. And so, like I said, and you can see it right here. Check the height of the floorboards compared to the Harley down here. That is the sole difference between these two. I never even noticed that before. Yeah, this one is so much more comfortable, man. And, you know, bars aside, because that's something most of us change anyways, that right there, that distance between here to your butt just makes all the difference when it comes to comfort. These need to come down a little bit, or the seat needs to come up a little bit to kind of balance everything out. I prefer the lighting, the main lighting here over the Indian. Obviously, to me, more light the better, and those day makers with the passing lamps is fantastic. You get a little bit bigger tank here. I think the aesthetics of the tank, I like the Harley. It's a little bit wider, just looks a little bit tougher to me. And I like the seats on the Harley too. They're more plush, and while I'm not a huge fan of these studs, my butt's more happy and comfortable in that one. This is kind of ugly. This is something that you definitely have to change. Make sure we, you know, do the flush mount license plate and then LEDs back here. Overall, aesthetics of the engine, I think I like better on the Harley. And that's what I think it really comes down to, the comfort. And some of the aesthetics to me look better on this one. Some look better over here. But I think if I were to put my money up, I'd probably take the Heritage. One thing separates these two bikes: the comfort of this motorcycle just does it for me. Everything I just talked about, this one to me edges out the Indian slightly when it comes to that. I'd love to hear your opinion, man. If you have one of these two bikes, what do you think about it? What are some changes that you've made personally to make them better suit your needs? And that's one thing too, even though I like this one better compared to this one, things can always be changed around. You know, you got the two most popular cruisers in America right here, so there's no shortage of parts out there. Big thanks to you guys for watching. If you like this video, maybe you'll like one of these other ones where I've compared Indian and Harley in the past. Go over and check that out. Big thanks. See y'all in the next one. And as always, hold them down.